Well, Eskom has now postponed a briefing that we're expecting to bring to you within this hour to deal with the power crisis in the country. Stage 6 load shedding, we now know from the utility, will come to an end tomorrow morning, but pressure is going to continue to mount, we're expecting, on the power utilities management and President Cyril Ramaphosa, who in the last 24 hours cancelled a trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos to deal precisely with this issue. We're joined by our reporter Govan Whittles, who's been watching the various movements with us now in studio. Govan, I mentioned pressure on the President and Eskom management. Just how much pressure are they under?
Well, the pressure's coming from different sectors, really. Just look at today. They were protesting Kroonstad, where the people were protesting because of prolonged power outages. In Phoenix, in Durban, there had been a 40-hour power outage, which had led to massive protests as well. That's just the beginning. We know that there are planned protests. We heard from the Democratic Alliance saying they want to march to Luthuli House. In the last few minutes, the ANC Youth League putting out a statement saying that they will render NERSA ungovernable until the load-shedding crisis is brought under control. So even from within the governing party, pressure being exerted on Eskom, on its leadership, as well as the government. And then the formal pressure being brought on the president himself. The EFF revealing in its engagements with the president when he convened that multi-party plus Eskom meeting. They had called for the president to step down and asked them exactly why they couldn't do what they did for South Africa on Christmas Day when they kept the lights on throughout the month of January. Right now, the power's been out every day in November, December, and this month. And the pressure
16 days straight in January, right?
That's correct. And it looks like the plan from Eskom is to lower to a lower stage of load shedding, but at the same time continue it, and that there will be an increasing number of movements that plan to march on different sites in South Africa to register their unhappiness. Not in my name, another organization that's marching on the 25th of this month to the union buildings.
And the President, yes, has now cancelled the trip to the World Economic Forum. There are these meetings happening between himself and the powers that be at Eskom, right? But realistically, what can he do? Because the power stations are still failing. NERSA has already granted a tariff increase. So what is the point of him staying?
Well, the real focus here is going to be on the emergency procurement of additional capacity. That's a resolution from the ANC's conference. We've already started seeing people from within the National Energy Crisis Committee speaking about emergency procurement of power. We could see the return of a car powership contract here, maybe on a short-term basis. That certainly was one of the discussions that came from the ANC conference, but it by no means has been resolved upon. They've resolved on creating additional transmission lines, which is something that was also highlighted by Professor Anton Eberhardt in a piece this weekend in the Sunday papers. But as it stands, just yet, all of the capacity from the independent power producers that are online is already being fed into the grid. They're already running the open-cycle gas turbines and burning as much diesel as they can. But it's really going to be whether or not they can get those 14 generators back online. That's what we understand the discussions are about at the moment. And if they had to buy emergency power, where that would come from, they're already importing from Mozambique, but they could import more LPG gas and potentially feed that into the grid.
And you mentioned earlier that the ANC Youth League is now saying it will render NERSA ungovernable. The DA tends to take its march next week right to the door of the ANC as the governing party. What is the mother body saying about the situation?
We spoke to the ANC Secretary General at the end of last week about what the officials are doing about this crisis. He revealed they held an emergency meeting, that they would hold it. We've now confirmed that they held it last night with the officials of the ANC, and it's the resolutions from that top 7 meeting that are now being discussed with the Eskom board as well as the executive management, which we understand does focus on the procurement of emergency additional supply. Implementing that ANC resolution. We're in a tricky situation here because one of the people that's in the top 7 is Gwede Mantashe, the energy minister, under whose control Eskom will fall, although the president hasn't made it clear when that will happen. and he's going to be taking a leading role in implementing some of these changes while Eskom is still under the overview of Pravin Gordhan, the Minister of Public Enterprises. So the power utility, not clear about who it will be reporting to and when, is adding to the confusion while it has to kind of implement a solution with the blessing of the President and one that the President will be negotiating with all within the next few hours.
Right. Govan Whittles, thank you very much for that. Govan Whittles, part of our team here at Newzroom Afrika that's keeping an eye on the country's energy crisis.